We are bankrupting our youth. We are bankrupting our youth because the number one cause of death for our children is now firearms. Firearms have surpassed childhood cancer, automobile accidents, and drowning. The CDC reports that in 2021, nearly 3,600 of our youth died because of firearms. We are bankrupting our youth because now more than ever, our youth are affected by anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and suicide at greater numbers than ever before. NAMI reports that our high schoolers spend an incredible amount of time thinking about suicide. 20% of high school students have seriously considered suicide. Another 9% report that they've actually attempted suicide. And sadly, in 2021, nearly 5,300 15 to 24-year-olds successfully completed suicide. We are bankrupting our youth because now more than ever, at younger and younger ages, our youth are choosing to self-medicate with illicit drugs and alcohol. The Clearinghouse Drug Abuse Statistics.org say that there is a 60% increase. That is a 60% increase between 2016 and 2020 in 8th graders, 12 and 13-year-olds. Those are your children. Those are your neighbors' children. Those are your grandchildren. In Montana, 4% of deaths can be related back to illicit drug use, and another 3% can be related back to alcohol. Now, why am I telling you all of these terrible statistics? Because this is the canary in the coal mine. This is showing us that our children are sending us a message, and they need our help if we will just choose to listen. Today, I would like to talk to you about the solution to this problem. I don't want to stand here and talk about all of the other problems. I don't want to rag on what got us to this situation. I want to talk about and focus on solutions. That solution is building generational wealth through relationships. Generational wealth, as we think about it today, is largely built around if we invest our money in the right location, with a little bit of luck and some longevity, we will see the greatest return on our finances possible. There's something in the order of $1 trillion a year that the wealth and finance industry does. I'm sure many of us at home have books that we've purchased. We have magazines that we listen to, podcasts that we turn to give us advice in that. But unfortunately, $1 trillion a year doesn't seem to immunize us from this drastic bankruptcy that we are experiencing in our youth. As a director at the Boys and Girls Clubs, I have seen firsthand in the decade in that position, in the 15 years that I have been with the club, what long-term, healthy relationships can mean for our youth. The great thing is that everyone here has the opportunity to build that generational wealth through relationships. There's only 3 things that you need to consider. That's being an educated investor, diversifying your investment, and the longevity of your investment. Now, to be an educated investor in our youth, you don't need to spend $1 trillion a year. You don't need to go buy books. You don't need to go listen to a bunch of podcasts. I would argue you could walk into any youth-serving organization today, and they would welcome you with open arms for your investment in our youth. Now, today, I'd like to walk you through the story, one of the many stories that I could tell you about building generational wealth through relationships. That's the story of Mr. Jones and Melvin. Mr. Jones is someone who benefited from generational wealth through his money's work in oil production. He came to the club to volunteer about the same time that I took on my director position, and he had to go through a lot of training. He became very educated in how to approach the kids, how to keep himself and the kiddos safe. But no sort of education that he got while he was looking at a computer was going to prepare him for 250 screaming and yelling kindergartners through high schoolers. Thank you, somebody knows, yes. He was taken aback. He realized real quick all of his schooling, his own childhood was not going to prepare him for what was going on. But because he was an educated investor and he had put himself into that process, he knew that the people on the floor with the kids were as invested in his experience and making sure that he was safe as the kiddos were. As he continued to work with the kids, he started to ask more and more questions. As he became more and more educated, he realized that while he was an adult and he was there to supervise, he needed to move from a position of authority to a position of understanding. That leads us to our next point in my strategy, and that's diversifying your investment. Mr. Jones sought out a community that was very different than what he had grown up in. He sought an environment to make a difference. And in doing so, he saw a lot of things that were vastly different than his own youth. And that can be a little scary. As we think about investing in our youth, if we're going to take our time and we're going to invest in youth, especially if they come from difficult backgrounds, we have to understand that kiddos don't trust adults because they just flat out don't want to. Most of the time, children do not trust adults because the adults who are in their life that they are supposed to trust have misused that trust. It might be abuse, neglect, some other form of ill response that they have received, but they were not always cling to the idea that because you are an adult, you deserve respect. And that can be a difficult thing to stomach as we venture into this as altruistic people who are really hoping to make a difference. And that's where Mr. Jones was at. But again, as Mr. Jones took that opportunity to communicate with the staff and see what was going on, he realized that he could make a difference. And in this, he started to see that there was one kiddo, one little 8-year-old Melvin, who was really struggling. He'd drop F-bombs at staff. He'd be throwing up the finger. He's slamming doors, walking out of areas, getting into physical altercations with his peers. Mr. Jones, instead of taking that position of authority, took a position of understanding and asked the staff, hey, what is going on with Melvin? He found out real quick that Melvin came from a family where his mother was addicted. Thankfully, his mother was able to stay sober through her pregnancy. But outside of that, largely, Melvin had to navigate the world on his own. And because of that, when Melvin got into a situation and started navigating it the way he thought it should be, an adult came at him telling him this is the way it's going to be, he pushed back. He fought back. He tried to gain control the only way that he knew how, which was loud, abusive language and walking away from problems. Mr. Jones decided he was going to invest in Melvin. As he starts to invest in Melvin, they play air hockey, foosball, they build Legos together. They're having a great time, and in the many conversations that I've had with Mr. Jones, I know that on more than one occasion, he heard stories that would terrify a lot of us. But because Mr. Jones was investing in Melvin, we saw Melvin make a turn. Melvin started to invest in himself. Those problems that happened multiple times a week, the fistfights, the loud abusive language, they started to die down once, maybe twice a week, some weeks with no negative behavior whatsoever. The staff were so excited to see this. They continue to build up Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones continues to build up Melvin, and then Melvin continues to build up Mr. Jones, and Mr. Jones continues to build up the staff. It becomes a cycle. Everyone investing in everyone else. Mr. Jones had started every other week. He moved to every week. He moved to multiple times a week, and there was a very, very beautiful relationship that was starting to grow. And this brings me to my final point in the wealth investing strategy, which is longevity. Markets ebb and flow. They peak when we're not ready, and they valley when we least expect it. But if we keep longevity, if we stick with that market, our investment will continue to take an upward trajectory. We will see the greatest return on our money that then can impact our children and our children's children. And if we can do the same thing, investing in relationships for our youth, we will see the same thing. Not long after Mr. Jones and Melvin are together, it's October, it's Halloween season, there's all sorts of fun stuff going on. One of the huge hits for both of them was Ninja Turtles. That's a cross-generational thing, apparently. They're bonding over Ninja Turtles, and Melvin's mother comes back into the picture. Melvin is so excited. His mother is giving an honest try at being sober. She has a job. She has a place to live. She gets Melvin back. And instead of Mr. Jones throwing up his hands, he continues to stay connected. He continues to work with Melvin. He celebrates Melvin's successes. He celebrates Melvin's mother's successes. But unfortunately, addiction is a cruel mistress. And in December, she fell back into it. But because Mr. Jones was there, the tailspin that Melvin got caught in resulted in the least amount of damage to himself and others possible. Melvin has a chance because of the investment that Mr. Jones has put into him. It's 8 years on now. Mr. Jones and Melvin are still a hot item. They're still doing great work together. But things still haven't been incredible. Melvin still struggles. I remember back to a conversation I had with Mr. Jones when he first started, and he was so excited. Melvin was going to go to an Ivy League school. His mother had never graduated college. Melvin was going to be valedictorian of his class. But Melvin still struggled. But because Mr. Jones has been there, Mr. Jones has gone to the school to advocate for Melvin. He has gone to the school to hold Melvin accountable. And because of this, while Melvin might never become valedictorian, and he may never go to an Ivy League college, Mr. Jones knows that Melvin is worth it. Mr. Jones will be able to see the impact on Melvin's life. Mr. Jones may not be able to see what that ripple looks like, but because he was there for Melvin, Melvin's children will know what it means to grow up without an addicted parent. Melvin's grandchildren will know what it means to have wealth in relationships. Any great wealth and finance strategist will tell you that education, diversity, and longevity are the cornerstones of building monetary generational wealth. I am here to tell you today that to build generational wealth through relationships with our youth will have the exact same generational impact. Because while what I am talking about today is about money, and the analogy is money, the currency is our children. The currency is our children's children, and our currency is their grandchildren. If everyone here today would just talk to 5 people about building generational wealth through relationships, and we each impacted one youth along the way, we could turn this around. If we look at our statistics from earlier, we will see that our collective investment would stop 200 youth thinking that they have to solve their problem with firearms. Our collective investment will keep 1,860 youth from thinking the solution to the problem is suicide. And our collective investment will save the lives of 660 youth from illicit drug use and alcohol deaths. Will you join me in building this generational wealth?